He jumped
We have
into
to
the
keep
frozen
moving.
water to
Mom,
save
I'm
her.
cold.
Love
I know,
began
little
that
one.
night.
We're almost there.
The plunge.
Stay close!
The beam from Frost
We have
Harbor
to keep
Lighthouse
moving.
swept across
He's
black
freezing.
water
We need
and white
shelter.
ice in its
I'm
eternal
cold, Mommy.
rotation.
I know.
A
Hold
rhythm
on.
Silas Grant knew better than his own heartbeat. 23 years he'd kept this light burning, 17 of them alone.
The cold is
The January
biting. We need
wind
to
bit
move.
through
I
his
agree.
wool
This
coat
way.
as he
It's
made his
cold.
evening
Stay
rounds along the
close.
frozen marina, checking the few boats locked in winter's grip. That's when he heard it, a scream that shattered the night's silence like glass. Silas's boots pounded across ice-covered planks. His breath came in clouds as he reached the marina's edge where the ice thinned near the channel markers. There, thrashing in a black wound of open water, was a woman. Her dark hair spread like seaweed, her pale face barely visible above the surface. A small research vessel bobbed nearby, its hull cracked against the ice shelf. "Hold on!" Silas shouted, already shrugging off his coat. "I can't, my legs," her voice broke as her head dipped under. There was no time for rope, no time for the proper rescue equipment stored in the lighthouse. Silas had perhaps 90 seconds before hypothermia made saving her impossible. He took 3 running steps and launched himself into the frozen void. The cold was a physical blow that drove the air from his lungs. His muscles seized, screaming against the shock. But his hands found fabric, then flesh, and he pulled Marina Thorne against his chest. She was limp, her lips already blue. Her camera bag, waterlogged and heavy, dragged at her shoulder. "Stay with me," he growled, kicking toward the ice shelf. His legs felt like lead. Each movement was agony. Marina's eyes fluttered open, and in that moment, something passed between them, a desperate, primal recognition of 2 souls facing death together. His fingers found the edge. With the last of his strength, Silas heaved them both onto solid ice, rolling Marina away from the water. She coughed, choking up freezing water, and her hand clutched weakly at his soaked shirt. They lay there gasping, 2 strangers bound by survival, as the lighthouse beam swept over them like a blessing. Fever dreams and vigil. The lighthouse keeper's quarters smelled of wood smoke and old books. Marina drifted in and out of consciousness, her body burning despite the cold that had claimed it hours before. Silas had carried her up the spiral stairs, stripped away her frozen clothes with clinical efficiency, and wrapped her in every blanket he owned. Now he sat beside the narrow bed, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. "The plants," Marina mumbled, her eyes glazed with fever. "I need to document the winter roses before they bloom." "Sure, you're safe now," Silas murmured, dipping the cloth in fresh water. His hands, rough from years of manual labor, moved with surprising gentleness across her burning skin. For 3 days, the fever raged. Silas barely slept, keeping constant vigil. He spooned broth between her cracked lips, changed her sweat-soaked sheets, and read aloud from maritime journals when she seemed restless. Sometimes she would surface from delirium and find him there, his weathered face creased with concern, his grey eyes reflecting the lamp's warm glow. On the 3rd night, Marina's eyes opened with clarity. She found Silas slumped in the bedside chair, his head resting on folded arms at the mattress edge, finally succumbing to exhaustion. His hand lay near hers on the quilt, and she noticed the scars across his knuckles, the calluses of a working man. She studied his face in the lamplight, the lines etched deep around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark beard, the vulnerability that sleep revealed. "You saved me," she whispered. His eyes opened immediately, as if he'd been waiting even in sleep for her voice. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, truly seeing for the first time. Something unspoken passed between them, delicate as the first crack in spring ice. "You would have done the same," Silas said finally, his voice rough with disuse and emotion. Marina's fingers moved across the quilt, closing the small distance between their hands. When her fingertips brushed his, neither pulled away. Stories in the light. Marina's strength returned slowly, measured in steps. First, from bed to window. Then down the spiral stairs to the lighthouse's main room where Silas kept his workshop. She discovered him there one afternoon, bent over half-finished carving of a seabird, with shavings curling at his feet like autumn leaves. "It's beautiful," she said from the doorway. Silas startled, nearly dropping his knife. "Didn't hear you come down. Should you be out of bed?" "I've been in bed for 5 days. I needed to see something besides those 4 walls." She moved closer, running her fingers over the completed carvings lining the shelves. Whales breaching, dolphins dancing, a woman's face rendered with heartbreaking detail. Who was she? Silas's hands stilled. Catherine. My wife. The sea took her during a rescue attempt, 8 years ago. He set down the carving, his jaw tight. She was the brave one. I just kept the light burning. You jumped into frozen water to save a stranger, Marina said softly. That's not cowardice. Something shifted in his expression. That evening, over bowls of fish stew, Marina told him about her work, traveling the coast documenting rare winter-blooming plants, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. She spoke of her parents who never understood why she chose solitude over society, of ex-lovers who couldn't accept her wandering heart. Maybe some hearts aren't meant to be still, Silas offered, surprising himself. Maybe some just haven't found their reason to stay, Marina countered, meeting his eyes across the table. The nights developed a rhythm. After dinner, they would sit by the fire while Silas carved and Marina sketched the botanical specimens she'd salvaged from her waterlogged journals. Sometimes their hands would brush passing the coffee pot, and the touch would linger a moment longer than necessary. Sometimes Marina would catch Silas watching her, his expression unguarded, before he'd quickly look away. On the 7th night, Silas finally asked, "When will you leave?" Marina's pencil stopped moving. "I don't know anymore." The storm returns. The blizzard hit without warning, a white wall that erased the world beyond the lighthouse windows. Snow piled against the door in drifts taller than a man. Silas checked the generator and emergency supplies with practiced efficiency while Marina stood at the window, watching the storm devour the landscape. "We could be trapped for days," Silas said, coming to stand beside her. "The Coast Guard won't attempt rescue in this." "I'm not afraid," Marina replied, and realized it was true. "Not here. Not with you." The admission hung between them like a held breath. Silas's hand found the small of her back, a gesture both protective and intimate. Marina leaned into his warmth, feeling the solid strength of him against her side. That night, the wind screamed against the lighthouse walls. They huddled close to the fire, wrapped in blankets, sharing stories they'd never told anyone. Marina confessed her fear of permanence, of loving something so much that losing it would break her. Silas admitted he'd been half dead these 8 years, just going through the motions of living. "Then we're quite a pair," Marina whispered. "Both afraid of the same thing, of feeling too much." "And yet here we are," Silas said, his voice low. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. "Marina, I." She kissed him before he could finish, tasting the words on his lips. It was gentle at first, tentative, two damaged souls testing the waters. Then Silas's arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened with months of loneliness and years of grief finally finding release. They made love slowly, learning each other by firelight. Silas's hands mapped the curves of her body with reverence, as if she was something precious he'd been entrusted to protect. Marina traced the scars on his skin, each one a story of survival. When she gasped his name, he swallowed the sound with his mouth, holding her as if she might disappear. Afterward, they lay tangled together, listening to the storm rage outside their sanctuary. "Stay," Silas whispered against her hair. "Not forever if you can't. Just stay." Marina's answer was to hold him tighter. Spring thaw. The sound of breaking ice woke Marina in early March. She stood at the lighthouse window, watching great sheets crack and drift toward open water. Spring was coming, and with it, decisions that could no longer be postponed. Her research grant was waiting. 3 more coastal sites to document before summer. The life she'd built on movement and discovery, on never letting roots dig too deep. It would be easy to slip back into that rhythm, to treat these winter months as a beautiful aberration. But when she turned from the window, she found Silas in the doorway, coffee mugs in hand, his eyes holding everything he wouldn't say. The ultimatum he refused to give, the choice he wouldn't make for her. "I spoke to the university yesterday," Marina said, accepting the coffee. "Told them I'm establishing a permanent research station here in Frost Harbor." Silas went very still. "Marina, you don't have to." "I'm not doing it for you," she interrupted, then smiled. Well, not only for you. There's a cottage near the harbor, the old keeper's residence. It has enough space for a lab, for storage, for everything I need. And it's close enough that a certain lighthouse keeper could walk over for dinner. Every night? Silas asked, hope and disbelief warring in his voice. Every night, Marina confirmed, closing the distance between them. She took his face in her hands, feeling the familiar scratch of his beard against her palms. You taught me something these past months. That roots don't have to be prisons. That staying isn't surrender. That love, her voice caught, that love is worth the risk of loss. Silas kissed her then, deep and desperate and grateful. When they finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. I was drowning long before you fell through that ice. You saved me too, Marina. You brought me back to life. The lighthouse beam swept over them as they stood wrapped in each other's arms, two souls who'd found warmth in winter's coldest hour. Outside, the ice continued its ancient breaking, making way for spring, for new beginnings, for the future they would build together. That evening, they walked hand in hand along the thawing harbor. Marina pointed out the first green shoots pushing through snow, while Silas told her about the summer tourists who would soon arrive. Plans took shape between them, the research station, a wedding by autumn, perhaps even children to fill the lighthouse with laughter again. As the sun set over Frost Harbor, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Marina understood what she'd been searching for all those years. Not a place, but a person. Not escape, but home. Lessons. Sometimes the coldest moments crack us open just enough to let love pour in, transforming survival into the sweetest surrender. True courage isn't the absence of fear, but choosing to feel deeply despite knowing how much it might hurt to lose. Home is not a location on any map, but the steady heartbeat beside yours in the darkness, the hand that holds you through every storm. The greatest rescue is not pulling someone from frozen water, but teaching their heart to trust warmth again after winter's longest night.